On a cold February morning in 2003, an ordinary commute turned into an unimaginable nightmare. The city of Daegu in South Korea became the epicenter of one of the most tragic incidents in modern history. What started as a routine subway ride ended in a catastrophe that claimed nearly 200 lives and forever changed the course of public transportation safety in South Korea. The Daegu subway fire serves as a chilling reminder of how vulnerable we are in public spaces when proper safety measures are not in place. As the tragedy unfolded, it became clear that a series of failures, from infrastructure shortcomings to human error, contributed to the scale of devastation. Today, we're diving deep into the Daegu subway fire, a story of tragedy, mistakes, and the critical lessons learned. This is more than just an account of a disaster. It's a reminder that safety in public spaces requires vigilance, preparation, and constant reassessment. Join us as we explore what went wrong, how the incident could have been prevented, and why the consequences of that day still echo in public transportation safety today. The calm before the tragedy. On February 18, 2003, Daegu, South Korea's fourth largest city, woke up to another cold winter morning. The subway system, a lifeline for thousands of daily commuters, was operating as usual. For many residents, the subway was an essential part of their daily routine, offering a quick and convenient way to navigate the bustling city. At the heart of the subway system was Junggangno Station, a central hub where trains from all over Daegu passed through. It was a normal day for most, as commuters boarded the trains, oblivious to the disaster that was about to unfold. Amid this bustling scene, a man named Kim Dae-han stood out. A 56-year-old former taxi driver, Kim was struggling with severe mental health issues, including depression. His personal struggles had pushed him to a breaking point, leading him to carry a plastic container filled with a flammable liquid into the subway that day. His mind was consumed by thoughts of despair, and he was about to commit a horrifying act. As Kim boarded the train at Junggangno Station, he blended in with the crowd of commuters. No one could have known that the container he carried held the fuel for a disaster. Shortly before 9:53 am, Kim pulled out a lighter and set the liquid ablaze, unleashing chaos in a matter of moments. The fire ignites. Within seconds, the flames erupted, spreading rapidly throughout the train car. The liquid Kim had ignited was highly flammable, and the fire quickly grew out of control. Thick black smoke filled the air, obscuring visibility and making it difficult for passengers to breathe. Panic swept through the train as people scrambled to escape. Passengers closest to the exits rushed to the doors, but in the panic and confusion, not everyone was able to make it out. The subway car quickly turned into a death trap. Flames blocked some exits, while others were jammed, trapping many passengers inside. As the smoke thickened, the situation grew more dire by the second. The subway car was made primarily of plastic and other flammable materials, which contributed to the rapid spread of the fire. Within minutes, the entire train car was engulfed in flames. The temperature inside the car soared, and the toxic fumes from burning plastic made it nearly impossible for those trapped inside to survive. What made the situation even worse was the lack of proper communication between subway operators and emergency responders. There was confusion about the severity of the fire and how to respond. The subway operator, unsure of what was happening, hesitated to open the doors immediately, sealing the fate of those trapped inside. This crucial delay allowed the fire to intensify, and the smoke became even more deadly. The situation worsens. As the flames consumed the first train, another train pulled into Junggangno Station. The passengers on this second train had no idea that a disaster was unfolding just ahead. By the time the second train arrived, the station was already filling with smoke, and the fire had spread into the surrounding tunnels. Like the passengers in the first train, those on the second train found themselves trapped. The subway system's emergency response was uncoordinated, and critical safety measures were missing. The station, being underground, had poor ventilation, which allowed the toxic smoke to spread throughout the station and into the second train. Passengers on both trains were now caught in a horrifying situation. As the fire raged, some tried to break windows to escape the smoke, while others desperately sought ways to open the jammed doors. For many, there was no way out. The fire quickly filled the subway cars and station with thick, toxic smoke. Because Junggano Station was underground, the smoke had no easy escape, causing it to accumulate rapidly. This made breathing extremely difficult and visibility nearly impossible for those trapped inside. The lack of proper emergency exits and signage in the station added to the confusion. Many passengers, unfamiliar with emergency procedures, had no idea where to go or how to escape. Firefighters and emergency responders arrived on the scene within minutes, but the smoke was so thick that they struggled to see inside the station. The dense smoke made rescue efforts nearly impossible. The toll of the tragedy. When firefighters finally gained control of the fire, the extent of the tragedy was staggering. The Daegu subway fire had claimed the lives of 192 people, most of whom had died from smoke inhalation. Many of the bodies were so badly burned that they were unrecognizable, compounding the agony for families waiting to hear about their loved ones. In addition to the deaths, over 150 people were seriously injured, some suffering from life-altering burns and smoke inhalation. Survivors were left with physical scars and deep emotional trauma. Having witnessed the horrific events unfold, many struggled with guilt and PTSD, haunted by the memories of what they had endured. While the immediate aftermath was marked by mourning and sorrow, the long-term legacy of the tragedy is one of reform and heightened vigilance. It reminded governments and organizations worldwide that safety measures cannot be taken lightly, and that the consequences of neglect can be catastrophic. This tragedy, while heartbreaking, ultimately became a powerful force for change, driving improvements in public transportation safety that continue to save lives today. For the families of the victims, the days and weeks following the fire were filled with grief, confusion, and anger. They wanted answers. How could such a disaster happen? Why was the subway system so ill-prepared for an emergency? How could their loved ones have been trapped in such a horrifying way? What went wrong? As investigators began to piece together the sequence of events that led to the disaster, it became clear that multiple factors contributed to the high death toll. One of the most glaring issues was the subway's lack of fire safety measures. The trains and station were not equipped with sprinklers, fire-resistant materials, or effective smoke ventilation systems. In the event of a fire, the design of the subway made it nearly impossible for passengers to escape quickly. Additionally, many of the emergency exits were poorly marked, and passengers were not familiar with how to use them. The materials used in the construction of the subway cars were highly flammable, which allowed the fire to spread rapidly. The design of the station, with its underground tunnels and limited ventilation, made it a breeding ground for toxic smoke. Once the fire started, there was little that could be done to stop its deadly spread. Many passengers did not know how to access emergency exits, and in some cases, the exits were difficult to find. The lack of clear signage and instructions made it harder for people to evacuate quickly, trapping many inside the burning trains. Communication failures also played a major role in the disaster. Subway operators and emergency responders were not properly trained to handle a crisis of this magnitude. The confusion over whether to open the doors of the train or move it out of the station led to precious time being lost, time that could have saved lives. The aftermath and reforms. In the wake of the fire, South Korea was left reeling. The sheer scale of the loss was difficult to comprehend, and the country demanded answers. The government launched a full investigation into the disaster, and the findings were shocking. The subway system had been woefully unprepared for an emergency, and a series of preventable mistakes had turned a manageable situation into a full-blown catastrophe. The Daegu tragedy was a wake-up call that touched off a mass-scale overhaul of safety procedures across the country's metro networks, as the incident revealed severe disaster management protocol issues. While the disaster was sparked by the actions of one individual, the systematic lack of proper response measures led to the death toll being as high as it was. In response to the outcry, the South Korean government implemented sweeping reforms to its public transportation systems. Subway stations across the country were retrofitted with modern fire safety equipment, including sprinklers, fireproof materials, and smoke ventilation systems. Emergency exits were made more visible, and passengers were educated on how to use them. New training programs were introduced for subway operators and emergency responders, ensuring that they would be better equipped to handle emergencies in the future. Communication systems were also overhauled to ensure that operators and responders could coordinate more effectively in times of crisis. These changes were not limited to subway systems. Public buildings and transportation networks across the country were reassessed and improved to prevent similar disasters. The legacy of the Daegu subway fire. The Daegu subway fire left an indelible mark on South Korea. The memory of the 192 lives lost in the fire continues to influence transportation safety measures to this day. Subway systems around the world have adopted many of the reforms that South Korea implemented in the aftermath of the fire, using the lessons learned to protect passengers. The tragedy also serves as a reminder of the importance of vigilance when it comes to public safety. While the reforms put in place after the fire have undoubtedly saved lives, safety is an ongoing process. Public transportation networks must be continuously maintained, and safety systems must be regularly checked and updated. The memory of the Daegu subway fire lives on not only in the minds of the survivors and the families of the victims, but also in the hearts of those who work to ensure that such a tragedy never happens again. The fire was a devastating chapter in South Korea's history, but the lessons learned from it continue to protect lives today. The tragedy underscored the need for better emergency response and evacuation procedures. Subway staff and emergency responders now receive rigorous training in fire safety and crisis management. New protocols ensure that communication between different emergency services is more effective, allowing for quicker and more coordinated responses. Safety overhaul. The conductor of the ill-fated train number 1080 later told local media he was unaware that a subway could catch fire as rapidly as it did, as he was taught that only inflammable materials were used in its construction. Contrary to his belief, flammable materials were commonly used in subways at that time. As the fire spread rapidly, toxic gas engulfed the station, making escape and rescue efforts extremely challenging. The Daegu Metropolitan Government, in 2005, published a white paper on the tragedy, in which they pointed to the flammable materials as the reason the fire had spread so rapidly. The majority of the subway cars manufactured before 2004 used flammable materials, such as polyurethane foam in seats to save costs. By 2009, all subway cars using flammable materials were out of commission, a measure that proved to be effective in another arson attack in 2014 at Daegu Station in Seoul. Other measures included Daegu Transit Authorities installing 13,000 fire detectors across its 91 subway stations, and Seoul Metro placing an average of 220 gas masks in each station. Another problem revealed by the Daegu Metro tragedy was that most of the passengers did not know how to manually open the subway doors. The manual door levers on the post-Daegu subways are now larger and in brighter colors than before, accompanied by large instructions. The Daegu subway fire remains a poignant reminder of the vital importance of safety and preparedness in public transportation. The legacy of this tragic event has driven significant improvements in safety standards and emergency response protocols, not only in South Korea but around the world. As we reflect on the lessons learned from this disaster, let us honor the memory of those who lost their lives by committing ourselves to ongoing vigilance and safety. The changes made in response to the Daegu fire aim to prevent future tragedies and protect passengers everywhere. If you found this story meaningful, please like, share, and subscribe to stay informed about important safety issues and updates. By spreading awareness, we can all contribute to a safer future for everyone. Thank you for joining us today. Stay safe, stay informed, and remember that the lessons of the past are essential for safeguarding our future.